Wesley, thanks for coming in today. Tell us a little bit about Section and what you guys are doing in the edge computing space.
You bet. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. So Section is an edge compute platform. Now, if you think about, the way I like to describe it, if you think about companies like Facebook, Netflix, Google, they have platform teams that help their feature developers kind of implement and deliver features, right? You build a platform, you deliver it to it. So that's kind of what we do. We just do it at the edge space. So you might be familiar with like a CDN workload. So what we do is we deploy Kubernetes-based clusters out towards edge locations that are globally distributed. So if you can containerize a workload, you can put it into this platform. And what that gives our customers, is the ability to have this module library of different WAFs, maybe varnish cache, could be bot blockers, things like that. And then what they do is they can use this kind of GitOps workflow to be able to kind of configure and deploy what their edge infrastructure looks like. So what we kind of do is we build a platform for teams to be able to deliver their own features on.
Now, edge computing has garnered a lot of interest in recent years, but there seems to be a lack of consensus on what it is and where it is. How do you define the edge?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So the edge is really a continuum. The way we like to look at it, it changes based on the use case that you're trying to deliver. So if you take a look at your local phone, that is an edge device. It's a device where you can deploy code. It's a device edge, as is IoT, different devices like that. You also can hear about like Netflix talking about an application edge. So Netflix, for example, can go all the way back to where the customers enter into their architecture. They call that their app edge. And so what they do there is they have all these individual devices that are connecting up to their systems. They deploy containers, use Node to talk to backend systems, but that's their app edge. Between that app edge and the device edge, you have like traditional CDN edges where you do cache or optimization for JavaScript or for images or for HTML, kind of that traditional CDN space. If you back up maybe a little bit closer to the user, you'll see things like an infrastructure edge. So 5G, you're hearing about kind of deploying things into a cell phone tower, for example. That's kind of like that IoT or that infrastructure edge or the telco edge. So the answer to that question is it depends. It's what is your use case and what are you trying to solve? Ultimately, it's trying to get as close to the user with your business logic that makes the most sense. That's what we think edge is.
And what are some real-world examples of edge applications?
Sure. So the first one is one I already mentioned, right? CDN, a CDN use case. So as I mentioned, what we do at Section is we deploy Kubernetes clusters out to remote edge locations. So with that, any workload that you can containerize can be deployed to that. So for something like a CDN, what we can do is containerize varnish cache, for example. We can deploy that out there. You can cache JavaScript, you can cache HTML, CSS, and it's just a container. So it's easy to configure, easy to deploy. So that's an edge. That is an edge. It's a CDN edge. We've been doing it for many, many years. Ones that I'm a little more excited about are things like the adaptive keyboard that is on mobile devices. So there's this idea of federated learning at the edge. And what that idea is you can do things to establish and build a model at the edge. And then what you can do is, so like the adaptive keyboard, as I mentioned on your phone, on Android phones, Google published a paper a couple years ago. It talked about federated learning, and then this adaptive keyboard was an instance of it. And so what you can do is, as you're using your thumb, tracing out the words on your phone, it literally builds a model. It can build a model based on your words that you select. So it gets more accurate as you're going. And with the idea of federated learning, what you can then do is take the model that comes out of that and then bring it back to an origin, bring it back to a cloud provider, aggregate those together, create a more efficient model, deploy them out. What's really powerful about that, though, is like with this adaptive keyboard, there's security that's put into it to respect like privacy, to be able to make sure that your privacy is respected on that device and not shared with the provider. So this idea of federated learning gives you the benefit of using machine learning on these like edge devices, but can do things to respect privacy in ways that we haven't done a really great job as an industry protecting privacy with.
So how should developers think about edge applications architecturally?
So again, it goes back to that kind of response before. it depends on your use case. What are you trying to do? We know from past studies like Amazon, if Amazon sees 1 second of slowdown time on their site, that literally over a year is billions of dollars that translates to. If Google sees a quarter of a second slowdown on search speeds, that means so many search results aren't going to be returned, which means real ad revenue. So you need to really understand what it is as a business that you're trying to achieve. If performance and latency are examples of things that you're trying to do, getting that workload closer to users is going to have a huge impact. One of the things that we really try to do with our platform is we focus on this idea of any workload, any place, which is this idea of deploying Kubernetes clusters and then deploying these containers into it. And then it's a DevOps mindset that removes friction from the development process so that developers can actually use a GitOps workflow to be able to push things out. And then finally, bringing all of the log data that's together and giving a single pane of glass so the developers can see what's really happening. So if you're trying to solve, for example, that performance, that latency problem, removing friction, being able to deploy anywhere, being able to have insight, deep insight into what's actually happening at that edge location, gives developers a tool so that they can make decisions and they can drive down latency. They can do things like be able to remove third-party libraries and put them after page load. There's a variety of things that can be done when you just have insight of what's actually happening at the edge. Then developers can really respond to that and be able to make better and better apps. So the answer to your question is it depends. It depends on what your use case is, what your workload's trying to do. We often see latency as one of the big ones.
So what are some of the challenges of operating software at the edge, and how are they being solved?
Yeah, so that's a big question. There's a lot of problems right now with operating different software at the edge. Obviously, connectivity for different devices is a problem. Storage space can be problems. In the space that we're working on, it kind of goes back to those three things: having insight of what's happening at the edge, being able to remove that developer friction of getting things that are deployed out there, and then really being able to deploy your workload to the edges that make the most sense for your use case. Those are the things we're focused on. There's still a lot of challenges out there. State at the edge. There's a variety of things that still continues to happen. What we're trying to do is kind of address those three things first, though, to try to kind of make it an easier space for developers to be involved with.
Oh, Wesley, thanks for your insights today. Much appreciated.
Thank you for bringing me on.